While Pakistan-U.S. relations forge ahead, is India being thrown under the proverbial bus? In a reversal of President Trump's first term, Pakistan has become the South Asian ally of choice. But what does Islamabad gain, and how should India and China respond? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Pakistan. Foreign relations under the current U.S. administration are unpredictable at best. Given Pakistan's trade volumes with the United States are roughly 20th of India's, many assumed a strong Washington-Delhi relationship would take priority. But instead, it's Islamabad that's curried U.S. favor. Some are questioning if that compromises Pakistan's relationship with Beijing and further agitates already tense Delhi-Islamabad ties. So what rewards will Pakistan really reap for leaning into its Washington friendship? Here's a look now at how the relationship has changed since the Trump administration took office. A dramatic shift in U.S.-Pakistan relations. 7 years ago, President Donald Trump accused Islamabad of giving Washington nothing but lies and deceit, calling it a safe haven for terrorists. Later, Joe Biden labeled Pakistan one of the most dangerous nations in the world. But now, in Trump's second term, the two countries are closer than ever. In May, tensions in the region flared when nuclear-armed neighbors Pakistan and India fought a 4-day war following a deadly terror attack in Kashmir. As the tit-for-tat attacks escalated, President Trump, according to Pakistan, stepped in to help broker a ceasefire. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we'll do a trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. Just a month later, Pakistan's Army Chief Azaman visited Washington. In an unprecedented move, Trump hosted the powerful military leader for lunch at the White House, discussing trade, economic growth, and regional tensions. I want to thank him for not going into the war, just, ending the war. Last week, Munir returned to the U.S. to meet with senior military officials, including the incoming U.S. Middle East Commander Brad Cooper. Washington and Islamabad also struck a deal at the end of July, which includes development of Pakistan's massive oil reserves. And in another gain on the economic front, Zach Witkoff, the son of Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, was in Pakistan in April signing agreements with the country's crypto council to promote and develop the industry. Witkoff is co-founder of World Liberty Financial, a company 60% owned by the Trump family. The delegation also met with the Army chief and the Prime Minister. You guys are sitting on trillions of dollars of rare earth minerals right now. Currently, it's an illiquid asset. By tokenizing them, you can actually make it a liquid market, and you can bring enormous wealth to the youth of this country. While Pakistan courts the U.S., its main rival, India, has been sidelined. New Delhi hasn't escaped Trump's 25% tariffs, and now Washington is threatening to raise that to 50% as punishment for India's purchase of Russian oil. The Trump administration has taken the transactional approach to an extreme with India, not looking at trying to build a relationship which we've been working on for 30 years. Meanwhile, Pakistan's largest trade partner is China, Washington's main rival. Over the past 5 years, Beijing has supplied over 80% of Islamabad's arms imports. It has also invested tens of billions of dollars and helped Pakistan secure IMF loans. And the Chinese side is confident this partnership will continue. China and Pakistan are ironclad friends and all-weather strategic partners. I believe China-Pakistan relations will not be affected by third parties. President Trump's unpredictable foreign policy has pushed China and India to rebuild their strained ties. So the trade wars, conflicts, and shifting alliances are shaking up the balance of power in Asia. So just how reliable is this relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan? And how much does it potentially irritate leaders in India and China? Joining me now to debate that and more are from Islamabad, Executive Director of the Center for Research and Security Studies, Mumtaz Gul, from Washington, Professor of International Affairs and Political Science at American University's School of International Service, William Lawrence, and also from Pakistan's capital, former Lieutenant General and former Pakistani Federal Minister for National Security, Naeem Kalibi. Thank you all so much for being with me. Imaz, I'll start with you and ask a Pakistani how good you feel about where the U.S. and Pakistan stand now. And please let me quote one of your former ambassadors to the United States speaking to the Washington Post. She actually said flattery is not a strategy. It is not long-term. Does she have a point? I mean, she hit the nail on the head because of the transactional nature that we have seen in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. We have had the best of envoys in the 90s and in the 2000s, but the relationship always remained on the edge. And right now, why things have turned around for Pakistan, which I'm very pleased about as a Pakistani, is because of the phenomenon Donald Trump. He seems to somehow dislike India or maybe the CIA. The military establishment in the U.S. has whispered something into the ears of Donald Trump, which basically has turned India into something displeasing for the United States. And that's why he has been basically publicly throwing slurs at the Indian leadership. So as a Pakistani, we are happy, but as the ambassador put it, it's flattery and it's very transactional. And I think the world, particularly India and the European countries, would simply wait out Donald Trump's term for another 2 years or so. General, do you believe strengthening ties the way we've seen so far is best strategically for Pakistan? Or do you share some of the fear that we've heard that the U.S. could effectively be using Pakistan as leverage to get back at India or get what it wants from India. You know, these fears and apprehensions and this transactional nature of relationship, that is all true. I mean, we all have that. But I would like to compare two scenarios. One is not talking, the other is talking. Having a relationship, having a good relationship, and not having a very good relationship. So whether it is intermittent or it is transactional or it is fearful or not fearful, as far as we have a relationship and we are talking, I think in my own assessment that it is much better than not talking or not having a good relationship. As long as we are aware that it should not be at the cost of any other closer relationship that we might be having with other countries. China, true, and maybe, right, China and India. I mean, as far as India is concerned, for example, personally, I would be happy that if America has good relations with us and also with India, because then we are in a better position to probably talk to India, resolve our issues, rather than, having America on the Indian side and not talking to us or not having good relations with us. So, in my own opinion, having relations with any country, even if it is an enemy country, and America is not an enemy country, it is good because then you are talking, you are communicating to each other. So that way I would say this is a positive thing, okay? So William, we're hearing mostly a net positive, but I'm going to look at the analysis of one think tank. You might not be a fan necessarily of the American Enterprise Institute. It did say that Trump is effectively taking bribes to change positions on India via the World Liberty financial deal with Pakistan's National Crypto Council. Is that what's at play here? I think it's part of it. The transactional nature, which your other guests got exactly right, includes corrupt transactions. And while the bulk of that corruption, comes from the Middle East. And I think David Kirpacher in the New Yorker counted about $3.5 billion the Trump administration has made through cryptocurrency and other mechanisms since the beginning of the Trump administration 6 months ago. That's all new money. I don't think that Pakistani-related money-making schemes is the only or even the largest factor here, despite the corruption and the unethical aspects of it. I think there are many other things going on here. And I also think that neither the Trump administration nor Washington in general views the Pakistan-India-America triangle as a zero sum between India and Pakistan the way we often hear that the Indians view it, and maybe to a lesser degree the Pakistanis view it. Rather, it's two bilateral relationships. One has been a roller coaster for many decades, the U.S.-Pakistani relationship, and it's on an upswing now like it was on an upswing in 2014 and 2019. And then the U.S.-India relationship is on a downswing. And there are many reasons for that. But the biggest reason is the fact that Trump thinks he can get his Russia-Ukraine deal by pressuring India through tariffs. And Trump is taking credit for the India-Pakistan, for ending the India-Pakistan war, which Pakistan said was true and India took offense to it, and probably for good reason. All of that personalization of foreign policy that Trump does has led to a soaring of the U.S.-India relationship and has accentuated and strengthened a lot of these trends that we're talking about today. There's so much to it. But I mean, very quickly, William, where do you see the U.S. actual role in the peace brokering, if we can call it that, between India and Pakistan in their last skirmish or war, however you describe it? Would you give the U.S. as much credit as Pakistan is? Not necessarily. And flattery is flattery. I think the U.S. played a role which the Trump administration hugely embellished and the Pakistani government confirmed. And then the Indians were opposed to how those characterizations were going on. The Pakistanis weren't exaggerating the way Trump was exaggerating it. So this is true in the Azerbaijan-Armenia thing, the Congo-Rwanda thing. Even there was a Serbia conflict that Trump took credit for ending that he had no role in. So there's been about 6 wars that Trump claims to have ended that he didn't really end. Yeah? Okay. That he hasn't really fully ended and very much aggrandizes his own role. But, as the largest power in the world, if the U.S. even does a little bit, we were talking about how talking is better than not talking. Sometimes when the U.S. talks, it helps in these peacemaking situations. Okay, MS, let me come back to you because there are other complaints I've been hearing out of Pakistan. The U.S. has really been reinforcing the power of Pakistan's military in general. I'll let you comment on this as well, but MTS, let me get your opinion first. That the United States is empowering the influence of Pakistan's military in its politics, and that is a dynamic that many Pakistanis were desperate to change. Do you see that happening? I think Donald Trump himself had promised to end that dynamic by saying that not only in the United States, but also elsewhere he would basically go after the security establishments to re-establish the rule of law. And this is what frustrated a lot of Pakistanis who had hoped that perhaps with this things would change. But the very fact that Pakistan's prime minister has not met Donald Trump once, he has been here, while the army chief was quoted twice in the White House and one for an exclusive lunch, essentially signals the American readiness to empower and appropriate more importance to the Pakistan military. And I would say that this has been part of the American CIA and the military establishment's agenda to keep very close to Pakistan's military establishment. Probably it also manipulated the events in such a way that Donald Trump had no hesitation in inviting Pakistan's army chief for an exclusive lunch, whereas the prime minister was sitting watching helplessly on television that his army chief was meeting with the president of the strongest superpower of the world. No, actually, the first thing which I want to clarify is that I'm not in favor of army interfering in the politics at all. This is not I'm saying after retirement. Those who know me, even during my service, I was against that, although I will not be able to prove it. But what I think is that whenever any country deals with another country, they always see who is actually calling the shots because they want business. They want things to move ahead. So I think Donald Trump knew it very well that whether right or wrong, who is calling the shots and with whom he should meet so that the agenda can be moved forward. And that is basically the reason that he, whatever happened, the meetings and all that that brother was also referring to. So in my opinion, it is not that he is trying to empower the military to carry on with whatever they are doing, although meeting with the army chief means legitimizing their presence. But he is aware that if he meets the political heads, it will not make any headway. So probably that, in my opinion, is the main reason that why he's meeting the man who really matters in Pakistan today. And so when we look at this moment, India standing tall, refusing to be intimidated by Washington's anger, we are really seeing the deeper truth of what sovereignty means. Sovereignty is not just a word written in dusty constitutions or spoken on ceremonial days. It is the lived courage of a nation saying, we will not trade our dignity for your approval. That is where the power lies. And when India chose to align more closely with Russia and China, it wasn't about turning its back on America alone. It was about turning its face toward the future. Because the future will not be built by nations clinging desperately to dominance, but by nations that are willing to walk side by side, even with those who were once seen as rivals. Now, think about how America has always presented itself as the guardian of democracy, the champion of free trade, the leader of the so-called free world. But when a nation like India pushes back, suddenly the mask slips. Suddenly tariffs rise like walls. Suddenly threats replace dialogue. And what happens? The very credibility of America begins to unravel in the eyes of the world. Because you cannot preach freedom and fairness while practicing punishment and coercion. You cannot call yourself a partner when the only partnership you want is submission. And India, with its billion voices, said no. That no echoed louder than any speech, louder than any summit, louder than any threat. It was the no of a nation that has endured colonization, division, famine, and war, and still stood unbroken. And I want you to hear this. America's attempt to isolate India has backfired in ways Washington could never have predicted. Instead of weakening India, it strengthened her resolve. Instead of making allies question India, it made them admire her more. Nations across Asia, Africa, even Latin America are watching this moment closely. They are saying to themselves, if India can say no, why can't we? And that is what terrifies Washington, not the tariffs, not the shifting alliances. What terrifies them is the possibility of a world where countries refuse to bow, where America's threats no longer strike fear, where nations reclaim their voices. But here is the thing. This is not just about economics. It's about identity. India stands up. It is not standing up only for itself. It is standing up for every nation that has ever been bullied, every people who have ever been told they are too small, too poor, too weak to resist. And I believe deep in my heart that history will remember this moment not as a trade dispute, but as the beginning of a rebalancing of power. A moment when the East told the West, we are not here to follow. We are here to lead. And yes, this is going to be painful for America. The markets will feel it. The businesses will feel it. The politicians will feel it. But sometimes pain is the teacher we need. Sometimes losing control is the only way we learn the lesson of humility. Because let me tell you, power without humility is dangerous. And America has had power without humility for far too long. India's bold reply is not just a challenge, it is an invitation for America to relearn what partnership really means. Not dominance, not control, but respect. And maybe, just maybe, if America listens, if it humbles itself, if it learns to sit at the table as an equal instead of a master, then something beautiful can emerge from this storm. But if it does not, if it keeps raising walls, if it keeps choosing arrogance over understanding, then America will find itself more isolated than ever before. Because the world is changing, my friends, and the tide of history does not wait for those who refuse to change with it. So let this be a lesson for America, a lesson for all of us, that no nation, no matter how powerful, can silence the voice of those who have found their strength. India has found her voice, and that voice is not trembling, it is thundering. And when we listen closely to that thunder, when we lean in and feel its vibration, we realize it's not just India's voice. It's the collective voice of billions across the globe who are tired of being dictated to, tired of being told what is best for them by those who have never walked in their shoes. That is why this moment feels so alive, so raw, so transformative. Because It is bigger than policy, bigger trade, bigger than tariffs. This is about dignity. And dignity, once claimed, cannot be taken away. Let me tell you, America has always prided itself on being the architect of the global order. But what happens when the architecture begins to crumble, not from outside attack, but from the refusal of others to continue living under its design? What happens is exactly what we are witnessing right now, the cracks spreading, the walls shaking, the foundation trembling. And in those cracks, in those tremors, something new is being born. A new balance. A new reality, a new possibility of a world where power is shared, not hoarded. Now, I know some in Washington believe they can still arm their way back into control, that if they shout louder, threaten harsher, punish deeper, they can bring India to its knees. But here's the truth, that strategy no longer works, because India is not alone. She stands with partners who see her not as a pawn, but as a pillar. Russia, China, and many others who understand that the future will not be written by one hand, but by many. And this is where the fear in Washington grows, because America has always depended on dividing others to maintain its own strength. But now the divisions are healing. Now alliances are shifting. Now what was once fragmented is becoming whole. And I want to pause here because this is important. America's mistake was believing India could be pressured the way smaller nations have been pressured in the past. But India is not just another country on the map. India is history itself, civilization itself, resilience itself. You cannot bully a nation that has endured centuries of invasions, exploitation, and oppression, and still risen to become one of the fastest growing economies in the world. You cannot silence a people who carry the memory of Gandhi's Salt March, who know the taste of sacrifice and the sweetness of freedom. That is why when India said no, it carried a weight far beyond economics. It was a spiritual no, a historical no, a no that said, we will not allow you to diminish us because we already know who we are. And my friends, there is nothing more dangerous to an empire than a people who know who they are. Because once you know yourself, once you believe in your own worth, no amount of threats, no amount of sanctions, no amount of manipulation can break you. But here's where it gets even deeper, because this is not only about nations. This is about us, you, me, every single person listening. How often in our own lives have we allowed someone else to dictate our worth? How often have we been told we are too small, too weak, too dependent to stand on our own? And how many times have we believed it? India's defiance is a reminder to us all, you don't need permission to stand tall. You don't need approval to claim your power. You don't need validation to speak your truth. When you decide to rise, nothing can stop you. So as India redefines her role in the world, as she steps boldly into alliances that reflect her own interests, instead of bending to another's, we are witnessing a lesson in self-respect on a global scale. And America is being forced to confront a reality it never wanted to face, that the days of unquestioned dominance are over. That the world is no longer willing to bow, that the very people America once saw as students are now teachers, and that is a hard pill to swallow. But let me tell you something, growth never comes without discomfort. And perhaps this discomfort, this shaking of the global order, is exactly what we need. Because maybe, just maybe, out of this tension can emerge a new kind of world, one where nations meet as equals, not as master and servant, one where dialogue replaces threats, one where collaboration replaces coercion. That possibility is real, but only if America is willing to change.